People, what is the hottest thing you've seen which isn't actually corn? I went to a Smash Brothers tournament last Saturday. Wall-to-wall hot nerds. There were about 20 guys there, and only 3 weren't at least average-looking. So there I was at a party with 17 out of 20 certified hotties, 0 women, and an entire night of playing Smash Brothers. The problem? They were all straight, which meant they may as well have been a convent full of nuns. It felt like that one Family Guy episode where Mr. Pewterschmidt introduces Brian to his prize-winning dog. Season 3, Episode 13, Screwed the Pooch. He holds Brian's hand up to the dog and says, "Do you feel that? Do you feel the heat coming off that?" Yeah, my whole night was like that. Just sitting there, feeling the body heat radiating off these guys, warm and inviting, making me want to bury my face in them like a pile of fresh-out-the-dryer laundry. I get that for most people, the idea of being banged by 20 sweaty nerds sounds like a nightmare, but you have to understand, I have spent my entire adult life trying to get to a party like that. All it needed to be perfect was swapping out all the straight guys for hot gay ones, blasting house music, and adding a lot more drinking. That would be my ideal environment. When people ask me what I need to be happy in life, that is the answer. That's what I need all the time. And now I feel like a total, or because I wanted to have fun and sleep with 20 guys at a party. And yes, I said 20, not 17, because I'm not about to hook up with 17 guys in front of the other 3 and not show them some love. That would just be rude. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I'm a stand-up comedian, and in my 7 years performing, I've had great luck with hecklers. Most just yell drunkenly at the stage, and they're easy to dispatch. I've never had a bad show due to a heckler. Until a gig I did last year. I was about 14 minutes into my 20-minute set, and I noticed a cute lady sitting at the table right at the front. The stage is set quite high, so I'm towering above her. She was staring right at me and smiling. She then grabbed a bowl of chocolate mousse. They serve meals in this comedy club, and then starts eating it. I sort of move away from her, but then come back. It's hard to avoid her because she's right at the front of the stage. She then puts her knees up on the edge stage and reclines in her chair. The club is packed, but everyone is looking at the stage, so they don't see her. She then starts licking chocolate mousse off the spoon. Big, luscious licks. All the while staring at me. I just lost everything. Missed my cues. Forgot my material. Ended up stammering through the last few minutes with, what's up in the news? Ha-ha. For the last few minutes of my set. Completely unsettling, but oh so frigging hot. She then did the same thing for the next comedian. Lady sure loved her chocolate mousse. Story 3. I had a close friend over who is definitely attractive. I'd say a total 9. We're really close, but strictly friends. She showed up wearing loose shorts and an equally loose blouse, and from the moment she walked in, I could tell she wasn't wearing any inners. At one point, she pulled her shorts up higher on her leg to cool down. It was a hot day. And from toe to upper hip, it was all just bare skin. Even though I couldn't see anything, it was one of the most intriguing moments I've ever experienced. I honestly don't know why she did it. Story 4. One time I saw a girl blowing a guy's flute in a parking lot, at night, in a convertible Mustang with the top down. There were no cameras around, so it wasn't corn and it was hot. Story 5. A few years back, I used to work for a grocery store. Let's call it Harry Tit. Anyway, there was this one girl that I worked with who loved to flirt and wink. Nothing abnormal, but I knew she had a thing for me. When my longtime girlfriend and I had a bad breakup, I didn't know what to do with myself. Now this girl, Miranda, wanted to help me out and feel better and offered to do just that. One day we both get off work at the same time, and she says to me, "I have about a half hour before my dad gets here if you want to do something." Now my mind is reeling. Where do we go? What do we do? Should I do this? We decided to go out to my car in the parking lot at about 3 in the afternoon. I drove to the corner of the lot, and we hopped in the back of my Montero. She immediately gets to work and gives me my first, and still the best, blowy of my life. It was amazing. But just as I was about to complete, her dad pulls up right behind us. I ended with the weirdest/best feeling ever. She then got out of the back of my car and into her dad's. It turns out he didn't see anything and just assumed we were making out in the back seat. I still get excited thinking about it to this day. Story 6. Back in college, I was that guy who no one really knew what to make of. I was friends with everyone, but I was a total loner. During break, I'd usually sit by myself in the same spot, a corner near the lockers, which were all outside, and the classrooms. I guess I did it mostly out of laziness, so I could grab my stuff before the crowd swarmed the area. I had this intense crush on a girl throughout most of my time in college. She was always in my home group each year, and she was absolutely stunning. Long blonde hair, perfect figure, high cheekbones, all that. We'd talk every now and then, mostly because she was a gamer like me, though she kept it quiet since gaming wasn't exactly socially accepted back then. Coincidentally, she and her friends would hang out just a few meters from where I'd sit every day. With such a huge crush on her, I couldn't help but glance over to see what she was up to. So one day, I'm sitting there in my usual spot, being way too socially awkward to just go over and talk to her, and I glance over, only to witness what is still, to this day, the most unforgettable moment of my college experience. One of the girls who hung out with my crush's group suddenly interlocks her fingers with my crush's, pushes her up against the lockers, and starts shaping the buns with one hand. They then proceeded to have the longest makeout session I've ever seen, or maybe time just seemed to slow down for me at that moment. Either way, I just sat there, completely in awe, thinking, is this real life? It was honestly the most intense thing I've ever seen. Not just because it was an unexpected display of lesbianism, but because it involved this girl I'd been crushing on for years. I've seen plenty of other girls do similar things, but nothing ever had the same effect as that moment did. I've experienced a lot of wild stuff since then, but that moment still stands out as the most unforgettable. Maybe it was because I was so young at the time, and it left a lasting impression on me. Story 7. I was sitting at a Starbucks on my laptop when a girl walked in and ordered a Veni drink. I didn't catch exactly what. She was wearing blue jeans and a tight gray shirt. She walked over to a high table about 10 feet away and leaned over it, rather than sitting on the high chair. I didn't even realize I was staring until she turned and caught my eye, at which point I quickly looked down. When I looked back up, she was still looking right at me, so I decided to hold the eye contact. After a few moments of just staring at each other, she casually tilted her head slightly back, glanced at her own bun, looked back at me, then shrugged and went back to sipping her drink. What really threw me off was her relaxed, almost indifferent expression throughout the whole thing. It was like she was fully aware of what was going on but didn't care at all. I was completely speechless, frozen by the whole moment. After a few more sips, she stood up, finished her drink, and just walked out. Biggest heartbreak and stiffy I ever had. Story 8. I was on a public bus once, and there was this incredibly beautiful woman standing about a dozen feet away. She was wearing a loose-knit sweater with a huge collar, the kind that slips off one shoulder if you try to keep the other covered, and she had nothing on underneath it. As she reached up to grab the overhead strap, the opposite side of her sweater slipped off her shoulder and fell, but the collar caught on her obviously upright nips just in time to stop it from falling completely. I'm pretty sure every man on the bus, and probably most of the women too, were completely captivated by the scene. She had a huge grin on her face, clearly enjoying the attention. Story 9. Some of the women at the gym. Prancing around in those skin-tight little spandex outfits that highlight their every feature. There you are, you can only glance but not stare. You wish that you could just bang them right there in front of everyone. And why? Oh, why do they always have to pick the tempting positions imaginable? I know why, to drive men, and women for that matter, frigging crazy, that's why. Story 10. A girl walked into the hotel gift shop where I work, dressed in yoga pants, a pink tank top, a tie-dye headband, and a North Face sweater unzipped. Her brown skin glowed, and her hair was pulled up in a ponytail. She caught my eye as soon as she walked in, and as she approached me, she kept eye contact the whole time. I was nervous, but before I could fully process it, she asked where the fruit was. I told her we didn't have any and apologized. Her tone was a bit rude, but honestly, I didn't mind. I just wanted her to stay forever. She asked about protein shakes next, but we had run out. Then, she shifted her stance, putting her weight on one leg and placing one hand on her hip. Her confidence and sassiness were so magnetic, and even though she was a little rude, it only made me more attracted to her. I've never felt that much chemistry with a girl before. She left that day, and I'll probably never see her again, which is honestly a little heartbreaking. Story 11. I was drunk one night at a buddy's house I was crashing at, and also the first night I ever hit out of my first zone. Everyone was going to bed, and they said I could crash out on this love seat, so I did, flung my legs up over the one arm, and proceeded to pass out. Roughly an hour or so later, I see a random light that wakes me up. I can barely see what's going on, and I look over, and I start to realize the guy is using his phone while getting a blowy from this chick that was at the house. I instantly got a stiffy thinking about it, and I just creepered and watched, and then finally they resituated to where I could see a little bit with the phone light across the room. And he was pounding her, so I proceeded to secretly and slowly polish my joystick. My heart was racing so fast in fear of being caught, but I didn't care at the time, and the sounds coming were intensifying as I finished polishing only a few minutes later. I proceeded to watch a little bit more and moved too much on the love seat, and they realized I moved and may have been awake. Quickest and most thrilling solo session I have ever had. Story 12. I used to participate in a lot of asthma studies back in the day. It was a great way to earn some extra cash as a teenager and get some medical care when I didn't have insurance. I'd been doing studies through the same place since I was 11, and by the time I was 17 or 18, they had a recent medical graduate working there. She was stunning. Brown, crinkly hair, blue eyes, fit, with a figure that made yoga pants look like they were made for her. She was funny, incredibly smart, and of course a doctor. She sometimes wore those old-school glasses chains too. Honestly, she was the definition of perfection. She was leading the study I was in, which involved overnights every other weekend. For some reason, it always ended up being just me there during my shifts, so she'd send the nurse home. No need for two people to watch me do a breathing test. So, there I was, stuck on an exam bed that was anything but comfortable, but I'd grab a chair in the waiting room to sleep instead. One night, I woke up to some noise and saw her walking to the bathroom in her pajamas. As she walked out, she stretched, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of her stomach. She saw me looking, smiled, and went to the office she was sleeping in. It was such a small, ordinary moment, but seeing someone you're crushing on in such a casual, everyday way, and still looking so incredible, it really sticks with you. Story 13. I saw a hot girl in a condo across the way breaking a dude's dong off with her skills. I then went home alone. I was over at my friend's apartment for some drinks, which is in a condo building surrounded by other condo buildings, City Place in Toronto, and we're out sitting on his patio having a smoke. In the condo directly across from us, about 80 feet away, the super cute girl who lives there has all her blinds open and is banging this guy on her couch super hard. She wasn't getting banged, she was doing the banging. I've never seen anyone going so hard in my life. Friggin' rodeo going on over there. My friend and I both look at each other and just say, damn. We finish our smokes while enjoying the show, then go back inside. He goes to bed with his fiancée. I head home alone, now all fired up. Story 14. A friend of mine looked incredibly attractive on this really hot day. She was wearing a beautiful bikini, showing off a bit of side lights, and had on this loose, flowy shirt. I'm not sure what it's called. The best part was that we were playful with each other, which was surprising because I usually get really shy, nervous, and uncomfortable around girls. She was always pretty touchy with me, but we weren't interested in each other. At least, that's what I thought. But that day, I couldn't help feeling really attracted to her. She was sunbathing in the garden, and honestly, it was hard not to stare. Her body was just spectacular. A few hours later, her friend came over, and when our friend went inside to grab a drink, she said to me, "Is it just me, or is she looking insanely hot today? I can't stop staring at her side lights." I responded with, "She looks really beautiful today." I caught myself staring at her a few times. Her reply was, "I saw you checking her out, that's why I brought it up." It started to get cold outside as the wind picked up, so we went inside to watch a movie, with her friend sitting between us. Honestly, we probably ended up looking at her more than we actually watched the movie. Story 15. When I was 18, I worked at a shop that sold cider, donuts, candied apples, cookies, pies, and other treats, the cider mill in Endicott, for anyone who knows it. I was working the register one day when this incredibly attractive woman in her mid-20s came up to buy some donuts and cider. She had shoulder-length blonde hair, glasses, and was wearing a bright red turtleneck with matching lipstick. Now, here's an important detail. I had just watched The Hot Chick with Rob Schneider about a week prior. As she was waiting, she reached into her donut bag, picked out a powdered sugar donut, and took a slow, deliberate bite before paying. Her lips squeezed around the donut, leaving powdered sugar all over her bright red lipstick. Then, a piece of the donut broke off and fell down onto her chest. Up until that point, she'd been making eye contact with me. But now she was patting and brushing the sugar off her chest, her lips slightly parted in surprise. At that moment, my 18-year-old brain started playing scenes from the movie. I was frozen, waiting for her to ask for the donuts for free, just like the girl in the movie did when she sucked the top of the ice off the drink. I probably would have obliged if she had. Then her boyfriend's voice snapped me out of my daze. "How much do we owe you?" I glanced over at him, and I felt my eyebrows furrow in frustration. "Well, what did you get?" And just like that, the moment ended. Story 16. When I was in high school, a girl I was friends with convinced her parents to rent her a small hall for her birthday party. I was invited, but I'm a few years older than her and most of her friends. So I hung out with my buddy, who got paid like $20 to DJ it. Anyways, it wasn't a huge thing. She had like 15 friends or so there, and her parents and some of their friends hung out in the parking lot out back barbecuing and chatting. Every once in a while, someone would pop in and grab a pop or something from the table that was set up in the hall, and I assumed check in on everything. Later on, some guys and a girl that the birthday girl knew showed up already half drunk. It really wasn't that kind of party, and the girl's dad, who was pretty old, she was a late-in-life baby, noticed and went to talk to them shortly after they came. He noticed the booze and tried to take it away from them, and apparently one of the guys took a swing at her dad. The guy came running through the hall from the back door, out a side hallway, and disappeared. A few seconds later, the dad came in looking for the guy and told the birthday girl what happened. She was pissed and took off after the guy, ready to beat the hell out of him. When she got pissed off, it was without a doubt the hottest thing I have ever seen. Something about that girl being angry just makes her 100 times hotter, and she's already damn good looking to start with. I've seen her mad a few times since then, though not nearly so much, and yeah, just wow. Story 17. I was on my way home, and while driving through a neighborhood close to mine, I spot this girl with a lawnmower. I have never seen a girl this friggin' attractive in my life. She had brownish red hair, her skin was tanned and slightly shiny from sweat. Her body was just perfect, but what I found hot was that, as pretty as she was actually outside doing work. Like, it was somehow attractive to me to see this beautiful girl outside, in the heat. Story. This might sound cheesy, but it's the truth. My wife on our wedding night. On our wedding night, there weren't any big surprises. We had already lived together for about a year, so there was no mystery in that sense. But still, I don't know how to fully explain what happened. She stepped out of the bathroom wearing one of my white undershirts, her panties, and a pair of white socks. Her feet always get cold. And just like that, she completely took my breath away. Story 18. In Florida, there was a small hotel, just 4 stories high. Every day, a woman would sunbathe on the roof. Since there were no taller buildings nearby, she felt comfortable enough to sunbathe completely bare. One afternoon, as she lay on her stomach soaking up the sun, she heard footsteps approaching. Panicked, she quickly grabbed a towel and wrapped it around herself. A man appeared and said, "I really wish you wouldn't sunbathe all bare up here." She frowned. "You've never complained before." He sighed. "That's true. But I do wish you'd go back to wearing your bathing suit." Confused, she asked, "Why?" "No one can see me up here." The man shook his head. "Madam, you're lying on the skylight of the dining room." Story 19. A guy slipping on a t-shirt. I particularly find that hot. Arms go in first, stretching up, and for a split second, his shoulder blades and back muscles flex before the fabric falls into place. That moment. And then there's the way he unbuckles a belt, that first simple motion. It's not something most people would find sizzling, and it's so innocent. But damn, shared hotel rooms with male friends can get real awkward. Story 20. A couple of times a year, I show up to a customer's house at 7 a.m., and it's the same scenario. A barely awake, smoking hot housewife, clearly not wearing a bra, sleepily answering the door. Then, of course, she has to bend over to sign the paperwork before I can start working. Just love the accidental surprise bazoombas. Story 21. Once my girlfriend wanted to go to the mall. She picked out a few items to try on, then headed into the dressing room. While we'd fooled around a bit, I hadn't seen her fully bare yet, so obviously I wasn't invited in with her while she changed. That left me standing around in the women's clothing section, bored out of my mind. Then I realized I could see my girlfriend's shadow on the floor under the dressing room while she was changing. No details obviously, just a silhouette. But as she slipped into a new dress, I could clearly see the shadow of her bare jugs. For something that was literally just the absence of light, It was the most hottest thing I had seen in my life up to that point. Story 22. In college, back in 1991, there was this brunette with big hair and glasses, wearing a black dress and black stockings. She was dancing to Invisible Touch, playfully lifting her skirt little by little, teasing anyone who would watch. It felt like I could have called up Motley Crue and given them the inspiration for Kickstart My Heart. Story 23. My partner, the charming, roguish guy that he is, gives me this look I know all too well by now. He has the kind of face that belongs to a charismatic thief in a movie, complete with that irresistible grin and a glint of mischief. It's the look he gives when he knows he's done something. Usually something small, like eating my chocolate or accidentally taking something, but he's so sure he'll get away with it. But God, when he brings that look into play, it just melts me. Cheesy but true. Story 24. I had an ex who made Saturday mornings her cleaning day. She'd blast music and get to work, always in her yoga pants. She turned the cleaning into a workout, running around the house, dancing and sweating. Watching her like that always drove me wild. When she lowered the music, I knew she was wrapping up. She'd then come over to me with a big smile and say, "Babe, do me." Story 25. I recently went on a date with a girl I've liked for years. Everything was going perfectly, and she looked amazing in this black knee-length dress. At one point, she needed to go to the bathroom, and before getting up, she playfully warned me, "Don't look at my cake." I tried my best to obey, but just as she was at the doorway, I couldn't help myself and glanced. She caught me looking, smiled, and stood there for a moment with her head tilted back, letting me enjoy the view. It was incredibly hot. Story 26. Gave my girlfriend an adult favors card as a joke. A week later, she gave it back to me. We totally banged. My first date with my girlfriend was at a screening of Rocky Horror Picture Show. These shows are interactive, with call-outs and bags of props you can buy to throw at the screen at certain moments. I grabbed each of us a bag, and one of the props was a handful of playing cards. The instructions said that if you had the Queen of Hearts, you were supposed to give it to someone special with a mysterious, who knows what could happen. I reached into my bag and, lo and behold, pulled out the Queen of Hearts. I handed it to her as a joke, and she shot me a really look but laughed. Fast forward a week, and things are definitely heating up between us. Finally, she whispers that I should grab a protection while she goes to get something. When I return to the bedside, she's clearly hiding something behind her back. Suddenly, she throws it at me, leaping into bed. I look down, and it's the Queen of Hearts. Yeah, she's definitely a keeper. Story 27. One day, during a walkthrough with a client's group and my husband, I found myself walking toward the back with a few people while my husband was a little ahead of me. As I was taking notes and moving around, I suddenly became very aware of his smooth, effortless gait and the muscles in his back. The sunlight hit him just right, highlighting each fluid motion of his muscles as they moved in perfect harmony, like a large cat stalking its prey. Naturally, my eyes followed the movement down to his hips and his cakes, and in that moment, I became acutely aware that I wasn't the only woman in the group admiring my husband's lean, muscular physique. That's when it hit me, and poor husband had no idea what happened after the meeting that day. Story 28. During class one time, there was this girl wearing yoga pants and an orange sweatshirt. Her figure was hard to ignore, and I couldn't help but notice how great she looked. As I walked through the room to my seat, she was blocking the aisle, and I had to pass right by her. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible. Not that I didn't want to, but you get what I mean. I glanced over at my guy friends, and they caught on to what I was looking at. I just shrugged and threw my hands up like I didn't know what to do, and of course, my friends started laughing. I kept staring, though, totally lost in the moment. Finally, she moved, and I made my way to my seat. I looked at another friend across the room, and he was practically dying laughing at me. I was definitely hooked on her. She looked amazing. Story 29. I was in a Western Civ class in college, and there was a girl named Sarah who sat at the back of the room against the entrance wall. She was a brunette, thin but fit, wore glasses, and sometimes seemed engaged in the class, but most of the time she wasn't. I'd often glance over to my right, just to catch a look at her. One day, she was wearing a sleeveless blouse, and as she moved or lifted her arm, I caught a glimpse of the upper edge of a pink satin cami and got an instant stiffy. It was an unexpected reaction that hasn't happened again since, and I'm almost 50 now. Sometimes, I wish I could go back to those simpler days. Story 30. In high school, my first girlfriend was incredibly innocent. I knew we weren't going to sleep together, but honestly, I didn't mind. Just being able to date her was enough for me at that time. Then one day, at band camp, I know cliché, she was sitting cross-legged on the ground, and I realized I could see directly up the leg of her shorts. It hit me that no other guy had seen this before, and it would be many years before anyone else would. Later that day, random people came up to me and asked why I had such a goofy smile on my face. Story 31. Oh man, this is kind of shameful. But I used to work with a middle-aged woman who was very prim and proper. One day I was in the office, and she was on the phone on a personal call. I don't know what she was talking about, or even who to, but she was very animated in her responses and clearly very into the conversation. So, all of a sudden, whoever she is speaking to obviously goes on a full-blown rant or something, because she starts going, aha, yes, 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 aha, yes. I don't doubt for 1 second it was just a bit of friendly banter and completely innocent. And it only lasted for a short while, but man, hearing her got me so damn fired up. Story 32. I met my wife in college, and the attraction between us was instant and mutual, though I'm pretty awkward and nerdy, and most people would probably say she's way out of my league. Before we really started dating, she would tease me a lot, and even after we got together, she kept it up. I'd be sitting in our usual hangout spot, just chilling with our group, whether I was working or playing Magic or something, and she'd walk over, sit right down in my lap without a second thought. Of course, I'd be instantly hot, and after a few minutes of that, I'd be trying to keep a straight face while my brain barely functioned. Once she knew she had me, she'd stand up and casually say, "Gotta go to class," before walking off. If she was in a particularly mischievous mood, she'd do that, and then suggest we grab food. Just thinking about it now. Well, let's just say I'm feeling a little nostalgic. Story 33. I took a yoga class next to a beautiful blonde woman who was a beginner. Throughout the session, she sighed, moaned, gasped, and even grunted a couple of times. Her sounds were pretty similar to what you'd hear in a corno, minus the cheesy music. And those pants, and the poses she was doing. It was a class we were both signed up for, so every time I went, I had to deal with it. I felt like a little boy trying to hide a stiffy in class. Story 34. My partner and I had a mutual friend who I found pretty damn attractive, smart, funny, and confident, a total ladies' man. One night, we were out drinking, all of us with a nice buzz going, and my partner jokingly suggested that our mutual friend come back to our place after the bar closed for a three-way. Our totally straight buddy paused for a moment, threw back his shot, took a drag off his cigarette, and did a French inhale, clearly considering it. Then he put out the cigarette, looked me in the eye, and smiled. Sure. It ended up being a pretty amazing night. Story 35. When I was 18, I worked as a lifeguard at a large water park. At the end of the day, the head guards would lead the team around the park to clean up. One evening, I was being led by this stunning woman who looked like she was in her early 20s, tan with an Australian vibe. It was the end of a long day, and I was exhausted, so I didn't really care about anything except admiring her as we walked around the park. Eventually, she glanced over her shoulder, and when I looked up, our eyes met. In that moment, I was struck by the most seductive look I'd ever seen. It was like she was saying, "Yeah, I know you're checking me out, and I don't mind." TLDR, women have the power to bring me to my knees with the right look on their face. Story 36. That scene in Dirty Dancing. I know, it's a cliché, where they've established that nobody puts baby in the corner, and they're midway through the final dance. The part where Swayze walks up the aisle between the audience and does that little hip thrust? I'll never forget watching that for the first time as a young girl. It was the moment when my brain met my hormones for the first time. Crazy Swayze in those black dance pants, damn. And then there's the Phantom of the Opera. I mean, how creepy and stalker-y is that guy? It's pretty twisted. Story 37. I might be a little late to the party, but I still get excited when I think back to the first time I saw my girlfriend, who I've been with for almost 6 years now. I was visiting a much more fun college than mine, hanging out in an all-girls dorm, pre-gaming with some ladies. I was texting or trying to look cool when this girl walked into the room. I heard her voice and saw her hair swoosh as she turned to leave. I immediately jumped up to watch her walk down the hall, and holy hell, I fell in love with every inch of her, especially how her leggings hugged her curves. I had to know her name, and after muttering a few expletives, I started planning my move. I'll never forget watching her walk away, that cake bouncing with every step. I'm planning to propose to her by the end of the year. Now, who wants to hear how I got her to notice me? TLDR, entranced by bum, entrapped by love. Story 38. Back in college, this girl spent the entire night giving me crap about how I was dressed, which I thought was nice, and how I was acting, among other things. So, I started firing back with a ton of crap of my own. This back-and-forth banter turned into the strongest attraction I've ever felt for a woman, kind of like what happens in Hot Tub Time Machine. It ended with us getting nose-to-nose, just aggressively trash-talking each other. It was pretty intense. Unfortunately, I missed the obvious signals that she was into me. When she started asking about my life, my interests, and what I wanted, I just shrugged and said, nothing. She asked again, leaning in even closer. We were practically about to kiss at this point. Are you sure there's nothing you want from me? Still thinking she didn't like me, I said, nope, and left the party. It didn't hit me until later that night when a friend asked why I hadn't made a move on her. To this day, I'm still looking for someone who can turn me on just through words and behavior like that. Story 39. At camp, we had these drills where the senior staff would hide a dummy, and the rest of the staff had to find it. One time, the dummy was hidden in the water, and no one had swimwear on. Most of us just dove in with our clothes on, but there was this one girl who casually stripped down, leaving on just her black inners. What made it even more interesting was how nonchalant she was about it, like it was no big deal to her. Story 40. One night, I was out at a university bar with some friends, and we ended up running into a group of girls. As it turned out, two of them thought I was really attractive, but didn't want to choose between me. So, I ended up dancing with both of them, one in front and one behind. Things got a bit wild, and I ended up kissing one while the other was holding me. It was insanely hot, and I could feel the eyes of other guys on us, which sent my ego straight through the roof. Story 41. They had a hypnosis assembly at my high school. One of the girls on stage had huge titties and liked to wear sheer t-shirts and sweaters. When she was limp up there, she had the most ridiculous back arch, and you could literally see her nipples silhouetted against the backlighting on the stage pointing straight up in the air. I was worried that that boner would never go away. Story 42. I was at the library one day and decided to grab a cup of coffee from the cafe inside. As I walked past, I noticed a Middle Eastern woman sitting and reading a book. She wore a headscarf, so her face was mostly covered, but when she stretched her neck, I caught a glimpse of her smile. It was the most captivating smile on the most beautiful face I'd ever seen. The fact that her face was hidden only made it more intriguing. It felt like getting a secret peek behind a curtain to something I wasn't meant to fully see. Story 43. A coworker of mine from last year came to visit me at my bar, and wow, she looked absolutely stunning. She was wearing a forest green wool shirt with a wide collar, a white button-down underneath with red and white square pattern trimmings, and a black and green skirt with a dark red tie. I couldn't take my eyes off her the entire night. I was completely mesmerized. I've seen her 3 times in the last 2 days, and every time, my heart skips a beat. I think I might have a crush on her. Is that too much? She's 25, I'm 23, and she touches me a lot, like putting her hand on my shoulder and sliding it down to my forearm. Could that be a sign? Story 44. There was a girl named Stacy who was considered very confident and well-liked, which made things confusing for me as I was just beginning to notice the opposite gender. We attended a small private school, so everyone knew each other well and had grown up together. Stacy had a very charismatic personality, and like many kids that age, I didn't quite understand all the feelings that were starting to form. Stacy had a mom who was quite attractive, someone who caught the attention of the other adults, and I noticed her more as I got older. She was in her early 40s, and I could see the resemblance between her and Stacy as I grew more aware of these things. One day, at the start of 3rd grade, the class was catching up about our summers when I noticed a commotion at the door. I turn and see a sight I'll never forget. Stacy and her hot mom, standing among gawking students and counselors, sporting matching tight black leather jumpsuits, both zipped down to the chest, or lack thereof. Holy Christ, Stacy's mom was killing it. I can recall staring at the two for an unreasonable amount of time before collecting myself enough to join the usual cheerful summer catch-up, albeit awkwardly, as you can imagine. Story 45. In high school, there was a girl who was often called the hottest girl in school. One day, during a science experiment, she felt a bit warm and decided to take off her sweater. As she did, her undershirt lifted, exposing one of her jugs. I don't think anyone else noticed, but I did. I spent the rest of the class trying to keep my composure. Afterward, I was jokingly called the luckiest guy in school. Story 46. There were a couple of moments in high school that stand out. The first one was in freshman year, during social studies. The desks were arranged in a way that allowed me to see a cheerleader sitting at a certain angle. She didn't seem to mind adjusting her position, and I couldn't help but notice. Another memorable moment was in high school when there was a girl who had an incredible physique, particularly her figure. One day, she wore tight compression shorts, and it was hard not to notice, especially since I had her in multiple classes. Story 47. There was this girl I had art and chemistry with in high school. She was Puerto Rican and incredibly attractive, not to mention super nice and friendly. She had a playful sense of humor, often making jokes about relationships, but she seemed out of my league. At least, that's how I felt. She sat next to me in chemistry, and sometimes her shirt would ride up in the back, which caught my attention. I couldn't help but notice the little gap between her jeans and skin. I remember feeling a bit embarrassed about it. Despite the distractions, I was always there for her when she needed support, like when she'd skip class to hang out with her boyfriend. Looking back, I realize I should have respected her more. Story 48. During my senior year of high school, I sat next to a really attractive girl in economics class. Let's call her Vanessa. Vanessa often wore skirts, and each day when she would stand up, I noticed her legs swing as she got out of her desk. That made my heart race. I remember seeing her inners. It was glorious. This also continued throughout the whole semester. Every economics class, at the bell, I'd get a peek, and I looked forward to it every time. Did she know what she was doing? Probably not, but I'd like to think so. It was the anticipation and the reward of seeing her that got me. Story 49. One time in high school, my girlfriend and I were left alone at my house, so we decided to hang out in my room and watch a movie. I got up to grab a couple of water bottles, and when I came back, she was standing in the middle of the room, smiling at me. I was a bit confused but smiled back and asked if she was okay. She nodded but didn't say anything. Then she stepped closer and kissed me softly. We ended up cuddling on the bed, and at one point, she playfully pinned my arms down for a moment before getting up to grab her water bottle. She kissed me on the cheek and went back to watching the movie. I found it pretty hot. Nice move, babe, nice move. Story 50. One time, a friend and I went to a guy's house who was apparently dating two girls at the same time, and they were all fine with it. While there, I unexpectedly ran into a girl I went to high school with. She was known for being really confident and outgoing. We ended up hanging out, drinking, and chatting with some others. After a few hours, the girl and the couple disappeared, and I didn't think much of it at first. Later, when I opened a bedroom door, I was shocked to find the guy and the two girls there, all of them in a very intimate moment. I felt really uncomfortable and quickly closed the door, backing out slowly. I've never quite been able to forget that moment, and it left me with a lot to think about. Story 51. Back in high school, I ran my own lawn care business with about 23 regular customers. Sometimes, people would ask if I could mow their lawn while they were out of town or just didn't feel like doing it. One day, my friend, let's call her Stacy, came up to me between classes and asked if I could mow the lawn at her mom's house that weekend. I agreed and told her my rate, then she gave me the address. That weekend, I went over to her mom's house and started mowing the lawn. I was almost finished when Stacy's mom came outside in just a towel. She gave me a quick look and mentioned, "You missed a spot over there." It was so friggin' hot. Story 52. There was this girl who sat across from me during lunch. She was really pretty, and we had shared some moments together in the past, but we both understood it was just casual and didn't pursue anything further. Our friendship remained solid. One day, we were eating with a group of friends, and she was sitting across from me. I couldn't help but notice how everything about her stood out. Her hair, the way it fell perfectly, the way her eyes looked at me when I spoke, and the glow on her skin. I found myself really distracted by how beautiful she was, especially the combination of her hair and eyes. I ended up feeling a little flustered, so later that day, I told her she had made me feel that way. She seemed a bit confused, but after I explained, she smiled and just said, "Good." Story 53. Best friend asked me to take her clothes off, then we banged like animals. One night, one of my best friends and I were hanging out, dancing and having a few drinks in my kitchen. We were having fun, and at some point, she playfully started dancing close to me. I thought the moment felt right, and feeling a bit bold, I jokingly said, "You're wearing too many clothes." She gave me a playful look and responded, "Why don't you fix that then?" That was the signal, and things progressed naturally from there. We ended up kissing, moving to the couch, and eventually heading to a bedroom. It felt like a release of all the unspoken tension that had built up over the years. The night felt incredibly intense, and we shared an unforgettable connection. We spent hours together, and it was one of the most memorable experiences of my life. Unfortunately, she moved halfway around the world after that summer, but I'm grateful for the time we spent together. We had a great time reconnecting and sharing those moments, and I'm looking forward to visiting her sometime this year. Story 54. So here's a fun story. I was at a small get-together with about 5 or 6 of my friends, and a few more people were still showing up. We were all hanging out outside in the backyard, setting the tone for a chill night. That's when 2 girls around our age came over through the back gate, carrying big pieces of wood. Luckily, my buddy, whose house it was, had a small pit to put them in. As the night went on, everyone was talking and laughing in the dark, and the temperature outside had dropped to around 45 degrees. It was a bit chilly, especially for Phoenix, so we figured it was time to get a fire going. The 2 girls volunteered, since they brought the wood for it. They quickly got to work, gathering newspapers and kindling, and arranging everything perfectly for a bonfire. I thought to myself, wow, they clearly know what they're doing. As someone lit the fire, the girls started laughing, glancing at me and my friend. We had no idea what was going on until they lifted their shirts playfully. Just then, the fire ignited, and it was huge. And that was the hottest thing I ever saw. Fire. Story 55. During the spring break, I was coming out of lacrosse practice when I walked toward the front of the campus, where parents usually picked up their kids. There was a new kid on the team, let's call him Jimmy, and he had a mom who was incredibly attractive. I didn't know him very well at that point, but as I walked past the line of cars waiting for pickup, I spotted Jimmy's mom. She was sitting in her white Range Rover, looking effortlessly beautiful. She was wearing a light white cashmere sweater that caught the sunlight just right, and her elegant style caught my attention. I couldn't help but notice how radiant she looked, and I found myself just admiring her beauty for a moment as I passed by. It was one of those moments where you can't help but feel a little in awe of someone's natural grace and charm. It definitely stood out as a memorable encounter. Story 56. I once had an unforgettable experience when I was around 18. My friends and I used to walk one of our friends to the bus stop, and we'd wait with him until his bus arrived. One night, we were sitting on top of the bus shelter, talking and hanging out, when we heard a noise. We looked across the street and saw a group of girls, probably 4 or 5, on the 3rd floor of a hotel. They were standing by the window, with the curtains pulled back, and it seemed like they were playfully teasing us. It went on for about 20 minutes, and the mood kept getting more lighthearted as they had fun with us. But then, a man showed up at the bus stop, and the girls quickly turned off the lights in their room. It was a bit of a buzzkill, but I'll always remember that moment. Story 57. During college, I had a few moments where I found myself in situations where I could unintentionally see some things I wasn't expecting. In one class, we sat around a large hexagonal table, and since the seats were spaced far enough apart, I could see the lap of the person across from me. Many of the students in that class were athletes who dressed up for game days, and I had the chance to sit across from some of the more athletic and confident girls in the class. Over time, I noticed that many of them relaxed during the class, and sometimes their posture shifted, which gave me a different view. There was one girl in particular who I could tell was aware of her body language around me, and we ended up working together for a project later on. She had a very confident way of sitting, and when she adjusted herself, I couldn't help but notice. I know she saw me look that time, and she never skipped a beat. Damn sexy. Story 58. I work part-time at a fast food place while I'm in college. One night, around 11 p.m., things were pretty slow. Suddenly, I got an order on the screen and looked up to see this woman standing at the counter. She was blonde, a bit older than me, probably in her mid to late 20s, and had an amazing smile that caught my attention. I felt a little nervous, as I've always been drawn to older women. She comes in occasionally, but I've been too shy to strike up a conversation and ask for her number. I haven't noticed a wedding ring, so maybe I'll work up the courage next time. Doing something that most people hate doing, and Story 59. My ex, who I still have a bit of a thing for, always had this thing she'd do when she found something genuinely funny. She would laugh out loud, no matter what we were doing, where we were, or who was around. She'd do it so effortlessly. It wasn't obnoxiously loud, but enough to grab attention. For me, I'd usually hold back a little, feeling a bit self-conscious. But not her. She'd laugh and smile as if she owned that moment. Then, she'd often add something to make it even funnier, doing it all with the same carefree attitude. It always took my breath away, and for some reason, it made me really attracted to her. I tried to explain it to her once, but I couldn't find the right words to describe what I felt at the time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.